173.
5.
Nah, I took a shot in the dark. Of your favorite water sport podcasts. As always, I am with my trusted Kimosabi, Greg Fisher. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Busy day today. A
Yeah.
lot of changes, a lot of um, exciting news.
Yeah, man. Especially your haircut. That's the biggest. That's the biggest thing. We were actually coming on the air to talk about your new haircut.
Yeah, so it's not so much about my haircut, it's about my hair in general. So,
Yeah.
I mean, most people that listen are guys. So, I'm going to tell you guys something. And, we talked about this too. I went on testosterone therapy 2 years ago, and I started losing my hair. So I stopped because my family, I come from like genes of like parents and family with like great hair, and it was thinning. I was losing it. I'm like, what the hell is happening? So I went back to my doctor, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, you lose your hair when you go on to this treatment. And I'm like, oh, good to know. So I went on different medications to get it back, and nothing worked. And this is not a commercial for Nutrafol, but I will say that after 3 months or so of taking Nutrafol, major difference. It was game changing, and I got my hair mostly back.
I really don't think it was as bad as you think it was.
Because see, when my wife brought it up, because she's never said anything, she's like, "Oh yeah, you're kind of losing your hair." And then I looked at myself, like I took some picture comparisons. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm losing my hair." So
Yeah, I noticed that it's like always coiffed these days.
yeah,
It's a
I feel
little.
I feel more empowered. I mean, if I lost my hair, then whatever. But at the same time, it was like, if I know that what I did by taking that medication, I knew like that was the reason. Like I was mad at myself because, if I was losing my hair prior, I wouldn't care. But the fact that like I put myself in a situation where I was losing my hair, I'm like, shit, I'm not ready to lose my hair just yet. One day I will be.
I feel like your hairstyle as of recent looks like somebody else's haircut that I know.
Who? You?
Yeah,
Do you think I ripped off your hairstyle?
I'm pretty sure that in the next few months you're gonna have a big full beard.
No.
Okay, so this really leads us into our next subject. I mean, considering that we're talking about copying me. Yeah, we got some big news. We had some big news on last week's podcast, and this week's podcast we got some more big news. You want to lead us in? What are you doing, man?
Yeah, I wrote a book.
Congratulations.
Mastering OTAs. And I'll say, so if you follow the show, you probably listened to last week's episode, which was Kevin's book. And I will say, Kevin, like you did inspire me, because I felt like creating a book was like you share with me like how much of a pain it was rewriting it. So like I wanted to write a book one day, and I'm like, man, Kevin's, he's doing a lot of rewrites, and it's just it seemed like it was a real challenge for him. And I'm like, I don't really know if I want to do this. So I kind of put it aside. And then once you started getting to the end, then I'm like, maybe I can. And plus I had to I was doing a webinar, or not a webinar, but I was doing like a marketing session for some of our Trip Shock suppliers. So I started writing this huge guidebook on like OTAs and stuff. I'm like, well, if I already went 30 pages in, I might as well just continue writing and write a whole book. And so I'm like, man, let's do it. I think I can do it. And yeah, I finished it. So
yeah, congratulations, dude. It's no easy feat, man.
Yeah.
Easy feat. And I will say, after rereading your book, if OTAs were a dishwasher, your book would be the definitive fucking how to operate that motherfucker, dude. That is like, my God, man. I obviously you think about it more in depth than I do, more in depth than anyone in the entire world. I think you might be think about OTAs more than anybody I know in the world. So if anybody is like, not to pitch it, but it is definitely like a fucking, there's some things I guess I like always intuitively knew, but just like seeing like from an insider's perspective, you put a lot of thought into all the different pieces of, I wish the book would have been called like Trip Shock, the Master Art of Mastering. You know what I mean? Like, hold it up again. Let me see that thing. This looks good. America designed it. Looks really good.
So I'm gonna give America a shout out. So I went to her and I said, hey, I need you to publish a book. And she's like, well, I've never published a book before. I'm like, well, you're good at designing, you're good at branding. Just use me as a guinea pig. And man, she blew it out of the water. So she designed the cover, all the pages inside, infographics. Give a shout out to her designer, John. He did a great job. But, first for everybody. I also learned that when you sell on Amazon, you have to become a pro seller before you can ship globally. So all day I've been having people in my DMs asking why they can't get it shipped to Italy and UK and whatever. But, first for everything.
All those cheese tour boys and girls are going to be
Actually, one of the guys was a pizza tour company. So pretty damn close to cheese tour.
Yeah. I really see the benefits of it. If this is your like main acquisition channel. So if you're just like pretty much just like 100%, and I mean, it's for anybody, but I could see why over there'd be a demand for it. Cause it's just kind of like, man, like how do I leverage, my part in something that's like, it's not your website. It's not your YouTube channel. And there's a lot of good practical, pieces. What was your, and I think you asked me this on the last one about mine, but so what was your favorite piece?
So, my favorite piece is the second chapter, which is like the process of building your OTA listing, because I mean, I've seen every single side of like that process, and the most successful operators take a lot of time in crafting their pricing strategy, their imagery, their call to actions, inclusion, exclusions, the actual product offering itself, categories they use. I mean, it is not just, let's just slap this product on an OTA and see where it goes. Like, you have to take some time to create a strategy. Now, back when you started with Trip Shock, there wasn't as many products as there are now. So back in 2017, 2018, you could essentially just throw something on an OTA and probably get market share because there just wasn't a lot of product. There wasn't a lot of choices. And people were kind of like, okay, yeah, this is what I want. It's typically a commodity like product. Let me just go and do it. But there's a lot more that goes into just building a listing, timing it and everything. Like you have to have a strategy for it, really, especially with all the products that are on OTAs.
What do you see as like the biggest mistake most operators make when placing their products on OTAs?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's so many things. I would say the pricing that you use, the product you use on an OTA should not be the same product that you deploy direct or even on other OTAs. So I give an analogy in the book. So I like to play blackjack, and there's two different types of ways to play blackjack. You can play more of the standard that we all know, the standard blackjack where you were playing against the dealer. And then there's tournament blackjack where you're playing against the player. And when you're using OTAs, you have to have that mindset that, you might have 20 companies in your comp set. You need to be crafting a strategy to compete against those companies and not necessarily against your direct pricing.
I got to pause you here for a minute. So you said comp set, and I feel as though like, I know the book's done, but I'm like, man, maybe you should have explained what comp set is for people that don't know.
Oh, I've actually like spelled it out a little bit in the book, but competitive set. So Kevin's competitive set's going to be all the pontoon rental companies. And Kevin, you do a really good job. You've always done a good job with looking at your competition, being competitive, being strategic. And that's another thing that I want to bring up is like, once we get into summer when everything's selling, so many businesses pull back. They shut us down. They just say, you know what, like we don't need any business from you. And they do it every season. And yeah, it annoys me, but at the same time, there's so many other companies that I can lean on to get inventory, but you always would give me a little bit to sell because you still wanted to stay relevant. You believed that this was a partnership. And at the end of the day, if an OTA doesn't see you as a profitable partner, then why do they want to have a long-term relationship with you if you're just using them how you need them and it's not a kind of a two-way street? So I think that's another thing. Like I had a client that he did $400,000 or $500,000 a year in bookings with us and just cold turkey left the platform. And I'm thinking to myself, and it wasn't anything because they were mad. It's just COVID was crazy and business was great. And it's like, why do I need to pay this person? Boom, cut it off. And it was one of the more shocking revelations during this process. Like he could have easily just went back to maybe one departure time instead of all five. Or even maybe like a limited amount of inventory instead of losing a channel that was bringing him almost $500,000 a year. So I talk a little bit about that in the book about, if instead of just like cold turkey leaving an OTA, throttle down and see how you can leverage it for what it is. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I always see there's like, I think part of the problem is like, you have to figure out like kind of like tricky ways. Like, so you mentioned one, it's just like listing a certain time. And just for our product, because our inventory, we have multiple of the same. So a little bit of secret to my success. And I don't know if you mentioned this in the book or not, but so I've duplicates of our same product on the back end that has shared inventory.
Correct.
So it'll take up those same, and a lot of operators don't know this because when you call and you're like, hey, what if I just want to give them access to a portion of our inventory? They're like, no, it's open API. So we can only, give them it's either all or nothing. So that's one of the strategies that you can use as well. If you don't want to, you have different time departures, but you don't want to give all of it. You don't want to give all of your noon departure. You don't want to give all of your 1 o'clock departure. You only want to give a portion of it. You can create a duplicate that you only give them access to. So
yeah, I touch a little bit on that. Another huge one that I don't want to give too much away because I want people to read the book.
Sure.
But one big thing that I go into is about splitting up your listings. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because the res techs require this or they suggest this, but let's just say that you're in a very, very competitive category, like boat rentals, for example, is super competitive in Kevin and I's destination. So Fair Harbor, I don't know why, again, they could have their reasons, but they're telling their users to have like separate listings for every duration, 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, whatever. So maybe when people are booking direct, that's fine. But if I'm having to sell those products in already a very crowded field of 100 listings, then your reviews are going to be spread out between all of these listings. Your bookings are going to be spread out between all these listings. And I talk about like how important listing placement is. If you are not in the top 10, really, if you're not in the top 3, you're missing out on probably 70% of the booking share. The average user only clicks 2 to 3 listings before they make a decision. So if you're spreading out all the weight of your listings, then you'll never rank for one particular one because they're all spread out. So my advice is to combine them, which that's what you should be doing, and all the reviews will go there, all the bookings, and you will move up in our algorithm. So most of the ranking is based on conversion rate, the amount of bookings. Again, we go back to that point about, are you a profitable partner? Are you a profitable product? We want to promote profitable products. So a few more other things but you have to read the book. But that's one big item that I touch upon is splitting the listings up. I think it's bad. It's bad for the OTA. It's bad for the customer. Just a bunch of senseless products.
So maybe you can touch a little bit on, like, let's say, like, cancellations and rescheduling always seem to be kind of a challenge for operators, like, especially if you're canceling or they're canceling, and you want to be able to you don't want to fuck the relationship up with your OTA. You don't want to cancel, lose ranking. I know some OTAs, and I'm not sure TripShock's policy on it, but if you cancel too many OTAs, they don't want to work with you, or they might derank you. Maybe you can talk to, and maybe TripShock does this different. I don't manage any of our cancellations. I don't know what has changed. But for example, say like Turo is not an OTA, but for lack of a better term, it's the same thing, right? So if we want to put somebody in a different vehicle, then it's a challenge. Like, so what the easiest process for the customer, is for us to cancel their booking or have them cancel their booking and then rebook direct. Not because we want to keep the 20%, only because insofar as not keeping the customer there, putting them through a bunch of hoops. So, like, what have you done at TripShock, or what do you lay out in the book insofar as like best practices when there's a canceling or making this easier for the customer?
I actually talk about this quite a bit. So my short answer to this is to try to resolve rescheduling and cancellations without actually having to cancel the booking, mainly because cancellation rate will affect your overall performance index, especially with the larger OTAs that use these indexes to help rank, because they got 150,000 products. They need ways to help them understand the performance without having to individually review things. Now on TripShock, we're small. We do track cancellation rates, whether or not it's a weather cancellation or not. We do track them. We do find that like parasailing and fishing charters have really high cancellation rates, and we have to weigh whether or not, again, is it a profitable product or profitable partner? Do we want to continue investing in it? Most of the time, even at those rates, it is. Now, going back to just cancellation policies in general, flexible cancellation policies is good for the user. Anything that's good for the user, it will convert more and make more money for both the user and the OTA. So, in short of it, I would advise to, if you have a lot of weather cancellations or things that are not under your control, that might still impact your performance rating, reach out to your OTA support reps and have that communication ahead of time. And we have great communication with some of our partners. They'll say, hey, we've had a lot of weather lately. We just want you to know that we're canceling. It's good intentioned. But we also have a lot of partners who cancel on us because their captain didn't show, or they don't want to run a trip that day, or they're closing for whatever. And I'm just like, all these OTAs are having to pay to bring traffic to the site. And if you are not able to convert it, then, there's a reason why they put these performance indexes in place, because they have to know who are the ones that are going to accept the bookings and, be a profitable partner. So again, try to resolve cancellations without having to actually cancel if you have to, and rebook direct, because if there's that's fine. It happens. Like, I think most OTAs know, but keep in mind, when a customer cancels a reservation on Viator and Get Your Guide, they ask the customer if they rebook direct, or did the supplier ask them to cancel. Like, they track that. So it's just something to be careful of.
I want to switch gears, and so this portion I found like super weird. So I feel like throughout the book, like, so this is truly like a standalone piece, right? Like, Mastering the Art of OTAs is really like an actual guide. And a lot of these books, a lot of times it's like super focused on the writer's product, the writer's services, and it serves as like a sort of like lead magnet to something else.
Yeah.
Not to say that you're not going to be doing consultancy, but there's not a hard pitch in there. Like even insofar as like where you sort of like you pull back the curtain on the major players, where you give like a synopsis of TripAdvisor, you give us a fairly, you know what I mean? You're not like bad mouthing or anything like that. And these are, yeah, and these are your competitors. But I felt like you didn't give like the same breadth. Like you obviously, because you are a niche OTA, like my one criticism, I would have liked to see Trip Shock up into the major players and got a little bit more insight to like the differentiation, but you didn't do that. What was your thought process behind that?
Well, it comes to being very objective. If part of me was like, yeah, but I talked about Trip Shock throughout the entire book because a lot of the examples I gave were based on my experience, but it wouldn't be fair to the reader for me to like put Trip Shock into the major players, because we're not. And I also understand that like people globally are going to be reading this book, and
Sure.
we really don't apply. So I do give all the OTAs all the things that they're good and bad at. I do give them all a fair shake. You're not going to see me talking negatively about any OTAs in the book. Now, I might have opinions on some of their strategies and why they do things and whether or not I think this good for the overall community. But I try to keep it very objective, because it's not everyone's going to use Trip Shock. In fact, majority of people reading it are not going to use my OTA, but they're all using Viator, Get Your Guide, and Klook and all those. And I really wanted to kind of take, not go after each one individually, but an overall view. Because I do use, like with WaveRes, we integrate with these OTAs. So I'm actively, using them, logging into their systems on behalf of our suppliers. So I see what they're doing. So
my favorite piece of the book was really two-part. I like the pricing piece because there's always so much question around pricing, like how do you remain competitive in the actual listing, because you're obviously listed against your competitors, and how that pertains to you ostensibly competing with yourself in the general overall, like what your prices are like on your own website. So, I mean, without giving too much away, key to the kingdom of the book, I mean, where do you see as like best practices go, like when trying to navigate, that landscape?
So I have some different pricing strategies in the book.
A lot.
Yeah. So the pricing strategy to me is probably one of the most important parts, because we can all make beautiful listings, highly optimized listings, but price is going to be probably the most important part of it. But when you have 50 competitors, and you're like, boat rentals specifically is very commoditized. So like there's very few things that are going to differentiate. If everyone hired a professional photographer and took pictures, then now it's like, all right, let's go to like inclusions, and then now let's go to price. But in price will ultimately be the main factor. So I broke it down to like four or five different types of pricing, like base pricing, which I look at is like basically creating a pricing strategy that's competitive. And then you have direct pricing, which is basically pricing that you charge direct, which in some cases, that's great. If you have a brand name, everyone knows who you are. They know the product quality. This is something that you will gain from years of being in the business and people recognize you. Direct pricing is probably fine. Maybe you're not trying to have a huge presence on OTAs. You're just trying to make up for, the 5 to 10% that you're missing direct. And then we have like early bird pricing, which I think this is probably the most underutilized pricing structure. So let's say you have a tour boat and your 9 a.m. tour is never booked out. You always have seats. So instead of charging the same price you do for every other tour, which most tour operators do, and I don't get it, discount the 9 a.m. tour. Who cares if you're, having lower margins? That that trip always has empty seats. But here's the most important piece to it. When you lower your price for that one tour, now your display price is lower than all of your competitors. So in the sort options, you're going to, if they sort it by price, or if you're offering on a discount, OTAs like to offer their users value. And I talk about this a lot in the book about how OTAs are going to put customers' experience way over yours. So you have a good value, good price, you're going to be sorted high. And then when they click over, they're like, oh shit, 9 a.m. I don't want to go to 9 a.m. tour. I want to do the 12 o'clock. But now you got the click through. So,
do you ever see it? Do you have any like data? That was my other piece of it. The analyzing data and measuring success. I like that portion of it. Do you have any way to tell how much breakage OTA or churn OTAs have insofar as like people figuring out who the company is? Two-part question. Sorry.
Yeah.
So one, do you know of any OTAs who obfuscate, and does TripShock obfuscate who the operator is? And then two, do you know what the churn is on people seeing who they want to go with and then popping over to their website?
So the first question, most OTAs obfuscate. We do too at TripShock to some degree. If it's a water park, you're not going to hide the name of water park, or a boat tour that's been around for 50 years. You can't hide it. I mean, the name's on there. Now, commoditized products or products that are known for being commoditized, like jet ski rentals, boat rentals, we try to not put the name in because, we try to promote on value and product. So,
commoditizing my brand, motherfucker.
But here's the thing. If they go to your listing, your name's in the reviews. If they Google your address, they're going to find it. That's why it's really important to have your product titles on all of your OTAs consistent. Your image, and you've done this, Kevin. All of your images are pretty consistent. Your product titles are fairly consistent. But when people leave an OTA and Google your name, it should not be difficult at all for them to find your business. If you're making it difficult, then you're not doing something right. In fact, I was at a conference for vacation rentals, and they were stressing how important it is to have parity in your OTA titles and your direct booking titles for this very reason. Because some people actually, I would say most people prefer to book direct. And if you're not making it easy for them to book direct by having consistency in your photos, your content, and your titles, then they're not going to be able to find you from that OTA. I do see in TripShock's keyword data, I see people actually Googling the exact title of the TripShock listing all the time. Your second part of the question you said about what was it? I'm sorry. How much is breakage? How much breakage? I believe that breakage could be anywhere from 10 to 25%. The reason why I think it's that high, because I had a jet ski business, ran for 3 years. And obviously, being that I had TripShock, I was able to get a good overview of like how much business was coming from what. I'll tell you, when I turned on TripShock and Viator for my jet ski business, my direct bookings soared. And I did ask people how they heard about us. And I was just blown away how many people put in these are direct bookings. How many people put in TripShock and Viator? There were some weeks it was like 40%. Like that's how much leakage there was. And then some people that book some of these things like jet skis, especially, it's like a walk-up activity, they just see it on the OTA, their address is there, and then they just go and do it. But we and in the book, I talk about like how much leakage we had. It was quite a bit, definitely double digits. And I think that if you have product consistency, pictures and titles, that the number could even be higher. So it's big numbers.
So what was your big takeaway, man, from all of this? I mean, we went through a lot of pieces of the book, but
Yeah.
how was the whole experience, and what do you hope to, achieve for readers?
So I just want people to know like what OTAs think, how they perceive you as a supplier. I also want suppliers to understand what they're missing and how they can optimize and get the most out of it without cannibalizing their direct bookings. I do talk a lot about that in the book, about not losing your direct bookings by using OTAs, using it as a marketing strategy, but not depending on it. So that's my thing. I mean, the whole idea is like, let's say that you have a team and you hire a marketing person, or you have an office manager that's in charge of OTAs, and they have known nothing about OTAs. This book is so good because you can just give it to them in an hour and a half. They can learn, years worth of knowledge that they can, instead of like having to work and use them, like they can get it right in this book, at least a basic understanding, or I would say more than a basic understanding, in an hour and a half. Like, and then anytime they hire someone new, they can use the book, they can refer back to it. It's just a great way to get introduced. But even if you are struggling with OTAs and you just need a refresher, it's great for folks like that as well. There just isn't anything out there. There's a bunch of scattered fractional blog articles, but I wanted like something that they can read quickly, easily, apply, and circle back to when they're struggling.
Well, guys, you heard it here. Greg is now published author. And again, man, congratulations on that, dude. I know it's just like no easy feat. And I did give you some feedback off here where I was like, man, I wanted some more like hilarious stories. Like, no hilarious stories.
Your
Greg?
stories, you had good stories in there. Now, I will say, I totally, Kevin gave me a little criticism, and he said, I would have loved to hear more of your story of building TripShock.
Yeah.
And my response to him is that my story with TripShock isn't done yet. And I'll promise when it's done, I don't have the right ending yet. And I don't know what that ending is. But when I have the right ending, then I think that it will be more of a story next time. I'm going to do this again. I finished it. I'm going to do another, and it's going to be more about the story and like what your book does, which I think I love the way that you.
I already know your ending. I already got it. But we'll have to leave it up. We'll have to leave it up to. I don't want to ruin the ending because that's like the crescendo. Like the ending is the big reveal, or the, you know what I mean. But I know it. I already know it, man. I got it. Yeah. I'll tell you off air when you want to work on the Greg Fisher manifesto. So if anybody wants to buy the book, obviously a lot of people do. How do they get it?
So you go to masteringotas.com. You can go to Amazon, search for it. Now, my daughter pointed out to me that if you search Mastering OTAs in Amazon, it actually autocorrects and it says Mastering Oats. so now everyone makes fun of me because like I'm gonna buy Mastering Oats, and it's funny, there actually is a book called Mastering Oats. So
it's a classic, a certified fucking classic, man.
So yeah, get yourself a copy of Mastering Oats. It's there. You can get Kindle or Amazon. I
already got the Amazon or the Audible request, and I was like, yeah, dude, probably not, but sure.
Well, I got your copy here. It's in my office, brand spank signed copy. Got a big picture of my face. Do you see this?
Oh, yeah, you got the true.
Right there.
Oh my god!
You like that?
That's a lot.
I'm gonna sign this.
Why is it so big? Have you read a book ever? Have you read like a physical book? That's the biggest fucking author photo I've ever.
Because I'm good looking, man. When they get finished reading the book, they get reminded that this good looking
that you graduated from high school, that you went to prom.
There, I got you. I got us in there.
Hey, look at that, man. I like it. That's awesome.
Got Alex in there too.
Yeah, neato. That's fun, man.
Mr. Doug. Oh yeah, give a shout to Douglas Quimby. He did the need an OTA guy doing the forward. So
Listen, I would be remiss if I didn't give Greg shit about his book. So when he told me, he goes, yeah, did you read the book? And I go, yeah, it was the worst book I ever read. And then he was like, yeah, I had Douglas write the forward, and I was like, man, I couldn't think of anybody more boring than you to write the forward. It was because I was hurt that he didn't ask me. He didn't want it to be action packed. Like, this is the greatest fucking book on OTAs that you ever read in your life. It's just been a hard sell. Join Trip, Shock, and Wave Res now.
well, you did a great job with an intro to chapter. I forget what chapter. You did a great marketing and techniques. Kevin O'Neill, right there. You start off the chapter.
Hey. I gave you lots of shouts out in my book.
Yeah.
You're all in throughout that thing, man.
I know. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, anyway, everybody get out, get your copy of Mastering Oats.
Mastering Oats. Yeah. And don't forget, if you get both books, you get absolutely nothing but great knowledge. There's no joint discount, but you get a lot of great knowledge. Yeah. Made to Millionaire. We got 2 great books, for you guys to get ready for 2025. So take advantage of it.
We're gonna have you excited about becoming a millionaire while you master OTAs simultaneously. It is the master class in water sports and marketing.
It is.
All right. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, keep it awkward.
Later.